So last year, I took AP drawing. I took it with 4 other APs, and one of them was AP research. That's a bad idea. Please don't do that. But I passed, and I got a 4 in AP drawing. And since then, I've taken AP 2D art and design. I don't know the score yet because I'm recording this in June, so future me, get back to what score I got. But since it's been a year and I took a different AP entirely, I kind of wanted to reflect on my strengths and weaknesses at the time. If I could go back, what would I do over? And basically just kind of assess where my art was back then. First thing I would like to do is, of course, kind of define what AP drawing is to put it in context with the other APs. AP drawing, at least from what I understand, is just a general demonstration of the principles of art. It's very much based in mark making, and usually people kind of go on the route of drawing or painting with this portfolio. This makes it different from AP 2D, and it makes it different from 3D because 3D is three-dimensional. What I focused on in this portfolio was my personal journey with my health. Specifically, I learned that I had an allergy to ibuprofen. I hadn't had an allergy before, and not only that, I kind of had a niche allergy that made it harder for me to look for pain medication, so I kind of went back and just explored all of that. The AP drawing portfolio has a few parts. First, it has the written evidence. Then there's the actual sustained investigation, which is 15 pieces actually in your portfolio. And then there's the selected works, which shows basically just 5 of your best pieces. Some of them can be from your sustained investigation, and some of them can just be pieces that you had lying around throughout the years. For my class, my teacher suggested that out of the 15 works that we had for our sustained investigation, she wanted 2 to 3 of them to be just process pieces. And what process pieces basically are just like work in progress shots that just show how your art works. And that leads to my first weakness that I kind of found in my portfolio last year, is that I didn't really like my process pieces. Like fundamentally, I just didn't enjoy them. They were kind of just put in there last minute, and I wish that in my process pieces, I showed process shots from the pieces actually in my portfolio, as opposed to just incomplete pieces that I did during that year. I think it just would have added more context to my pieces. That also leads me to another part of the sustained investigation, at least for me, worked like a story. There was a start, there was a middle, there was a conflict, and there was some sense of an endpoint or a resolution. And not all portfolios work like that, but for my AP drawing portfolio, that's just what I did, and I kind of did the same thing in my portfolio that I just did this year. So first off is just going through the written evidence. Like I said, that my portfolio basically just recounts the past year, which was 2022 at the time, and my experience with finding out my allergy to ibuprofen. I'll put the sustained investigation here, the first question. And then there's the second part, which basically is just describing kind of how you went about this in your pieces. For me, that was just referencing specific pieces. And now this just leads to my first piece, which is going backwards. And it is this piece. I don't think there'll be enough space, but it's this piece. It is 9 by 24, just the raw piece before I put this black backing on it for display purposes. It's basically just the most literal interpretation of going backwards. So if you see here, I had this film kind of literally representing like you're pulling back, you're going back in time. This is supposed to be me, and I'm just showing the events that happened at the most severe instance of my allergic reaction. I'll put it here. There's just details in this piece that I really enjoy looking back on it. I didn't really like it at the time, but a year later I realized that honestly this was probably one of the most creative pieces. Details include the calendar on the side showing the dates of what was going on, because this was in February, a week after my birthday. I have the Batman logo showing that this was the day I watched the new Batman movie. On my wrist, you have the hospital bracelet. My teacher wanted me to put in the details. I just didn't, but it's to show that I did go to the hospital. The cup with the pill on the side also shows when they had to give me epinephrine in a pill because my face was literally swollen. And me doing this is holding up what I unknowingly was causing this reaction, which was a pill of ibuprofen. I think one of the strengths that came out of it was just it was creative. I used acrylic paint, color pencil, and oil pastel, and I combined these. At the time, I did not know how to blend skin tones with oil pastel or acrylic, and I didn't really like depicting myself in my pieces. So this creativity came out of me not knowing really what to do, but instead I think it turned out to be a really strong piece. Image 2 is titled Going Backwards, and it is 18 by 24, and this piece is just in acrylic. This was the first time I did a fully acrylic piece in a while, because at the time I wasn't really a painter, and it was just using nature as symbolism of just the menstrual cycle in general. I thought that this would show that this thing had a natural origin, despite the allergy itself is due to kind of an unnatural substance typically found, ibuprofen, especially because flowers are often symbolism of like the female reproductive system. So I kind of played with that idea and just wanted to introduce viewers to what my topic was going to be about on a more intimate level. I don't really like the word, but I guess that's what it is. Those last two pieces I had actually done in the order that I did them, because in your portfolio you're just doing pieces throughout the year, but when you're starting to submit those pieces, you can just change the order that they were done in. So that first piece, that was the first one I did it in September. That second piece I also did in the end of September, but this next piece was technically number 8. So I did this around end of December, January. It is titled The Real Issue, and it is done with graphite, charcoal, acrylic paint, and color pencil on 18 by 24 piece of paper. And this is when I went back to exploring self-portraits more, and I'll go into later how this was honestly just incredible foresight to where my art was going to go eventually. This piece I really didn't like at the time. It's hard to get my likeness, and I did it on paper, with the acrylic was drying way faster than I wanted it to. But I think this also, one of its strengths is that it's just experimental, and it goes back into the idea of looking into myself and figuring out what this allergy was. It also is a good transition for the future pieces. The next one is titled The Invisible Numbers Above My Head, and it is done with graphite on paper. I like this one because it was experimenting with perspective. I kind of did this fisheye effect with the legs and just how I was positioned. And the invisible number above my head, the 176, shows the number that came up once I finally did do the allergy test to see if I was allergic to ibuprofen. And the number that shows if it's severe or not is 10. And I got 176. Had I taken it one more time, it would have been worse than a face swelling. So this was kind of me eventually reconciling with the fact that it was ibuprofen causing these problems. Now there's a process piece that goes in between the two of these, but like I said before, I thought my process pieces were kind of weak, so I'm not really going to get into those. But the next two pieces are a duology, and I did them both in October. The tip of my tongue, side A and side B respectively. The first one is just kind of a cutout of the bottom part of the face, and there are crab claws grabbing at it, and it's just meant to symbolize how I was unknowingly eating the things that I was allergic to, which for me was first off shellfish, which we had suspected for a while that I was allergic to because it made my tongue itchy, at least for shrimp. So I wasn't eating it often. We were testing for ibuprofen, so they were like, we could also test for shellfish, and they did, and I found out that I was allergic to it. Side B is just dedicated completely to fully acknowledging that I was allergic to ibuprofen, and I used these alpha bots, which I don't remember if some people had them as if they were a kid. It was like Transformers into letters and numbers. I put those on the lips to show how simple the realization was once it actually did happen. Plus it was good to contrast with the pen line work in background. This was the first time I actually had really dove into pen as being a consistent medium. At the time I was just doodling in my sketchbook and notebook, and then I was like, what if I just do a piece in pen? And my teacher was like, sure, you can do it. And I was like, oh, really? So I grinded these out in like a week, just kind of showing that experimentation and growing as an artist. I wish I actually talked about that in my written evidence, but I didn't. These two pieces are also a nice transition. You see the black and white background, and I'm just diving into that more with these very black and white heavy pieces. Image 8 is basically just a representation of running out of time. I used an hourglass to show that. Now we know what the allergy is, but now we have to deal with pain management, and no matter what, even though I'm at the doctor, the cycle's still going to be happening every month. This is the biggest piece I've ever done. It was 44 by 49 inches, which is insane. I don't really like it because I was kind of cutting corners at one point because of how big it was. But once again, it was a good sense of experimentation, so I appreciate that I did it. Image 9 is going back to that flower symbolism that I heard earlier, but instead of those flowers flourishing, they're rotting and dying. Once they had suspected it might have been ibuprofen, I stopped taking it, but Tylenol and other things weren't really working, so I was once again just stuck in this cycle. And instead of the flowers being just flowers, now I'm actually acknowledging those flowers represented myself. In between these, this is a process piece once again that I don't really like. And then we hit image 11, and this one was when I finally started doing self-portraits on canvas, which it changed everything. This piece I really like, but I ended up revising it in August, and I hate it now because I should not have touched it, and I did, and I regret it. But this piece is called I Don't Have the Heart for This, and I did this initially to be standalone outside my portfolio, but a senior friend of mine was like, this could fit if you just put it like right here. And it's kind of showing that aspect of like wanting to quit and just being done with this process of going to the doctors, figuring out what's wrong, out but not really getting anywhere. So I was just tired because at this point it had been like 6 months, and as much as it's not that much, especially for people who have a lot of like chronic issues, for me, I didn't have any issues up until this point, so it was asking a lot of me at the time. Image 12, another process piece. 13 and 14 also have that duology sense to them. The first one is just a hand in blue showing me giving up ibuprofen, giving up all these struggles. Other pieces are blurred in the back. And the second hand is showing the light and showing the new medication I would be on now. And it's just showing that things are changing for once. And that leads me to my final piece, which is called I Hope Your Flowers Bloom. And this self-portrait I ended up doing in March. It was the last piece I did, both in terms of placement in the portfolio and literal last piece. And I just thought it was really nice. At the time, my birthday had just passed and I was starting to get into self-portraits even more. And I was like, you know what? I haven't done a piece with me smiling yet. So that's what I've done here. This was overlapping acrylic with oil pastel and some gel pen. And unlike the first piece, which the acrylic was the thing I'm weaker in, the acrylic here was starting to shine more in my style, and that oil pastel was just like a decorative. So there's that overall growth in finally being able to be comfortable in self-portrait. Selected works are just 5 of your best pieces. And there are some from my actual portfolio that I used there, but the first one I used is not a portfolio piece. It's a piece that I'd done in the summer prior to my portfolio starting. And this piece I really like. Sadly, right now, some of the oil pastel has smudged. There's glow-in-the-dark stars on it in this version, but some of them have fallen off. It's looking iffy now, but it's really, I'll one day revive it. Work 2 is just practicing with acrylic paint, and I did this in April, so after my portfolio had basically been done. I was practicing with painting animals, and owls are my favorite animal, so I was just like, might as well try this, and it turned out really well. It was basically just demonstrating how I understood light and just making marks that implied softness, implied feathers, but they weren't really like really detailed strokes per se. Work 3 is titled Weather Woman, and this one I had really liked. At the time I had kind of developed this combination of acrylic base, color pencil, and oil pastel, and here I had this neon effect going. I still have that piece back there, but I'm not going to bring it out. I really like it, and I just thought it showed my good use of color at the time. And then this piece was in my portfolio, work 4, just showing that I understood self-portraits. And finally, work 5 is just reiterating my growth in self-portraiture at the time. So yeah, that is my AP drawing portfolio. Just a reflection. I think it was a great way to start into portfolio making and making art. I think since then I have grown a lot, so when I go over my AP 2D portfolio, it's gonna honestly look like a completely different person. But I think I was a little too hard on myself at the time of when I was doing it. I was like, I could have done better, man, I really should have gotten that 5. But I think that as a result, I really didn't acknowledge how decent I was at the time, even if it wasn't like what I aspired to be. I was clearly climbing up to a level where I would be more comfortable with my art skill and style. That's all for now. In a few weeks, I hope to talk about AP 2D and compare it to drawing a little bit as opposed to just talking about drawing only. I hope maybe this can motivate someone to be interested in AP drawing. It is a lot of work. I'm not gonna pretend it's not, but I overall ended up having fun at least. So that's all. Bye.